In this podcast, I'm at the National Army Museum in London to share the secrets of military intelligence from a soldier's perspective. And I'm delighted to be interviewing Colonel Tim Collins. Thank you for joining me here. Can I ask you just to give me a brief background about your military career so we've got a sort of context for what we're talking about?
Well, I joined the Army initially as a schoolboy. I was a soldier at night and a schoolboy by day, but that was the troubles in Northern Ireland. And then after university I went to Sandhurst and served with the Irish Rangers in East Berlin. In 1988 I joined the SAS, and I was with the SAS during the first Gulf War. Then went back to my regiment, the Royal Irish Regiment, then came back to the SAS as the operations officer, where I was very much working on operations, but supported by my intelligence department. And then I returned once again to the Royal Irish, and then came back as the operations officer at Headquarters Special Forces here in London. Again, heavily reliant on intelligence because I was directing operations, but operations are guided by intelligence. I went on to lead the Royal Irish during the invasion of Iraq, and then finished as a full colonel at Headquarters Land Command. After leaving the Army, I started a company which to a great degree was providing the US military on behalf, or the Iraqi police I should say, provided by the US, paid for by the US military, a police special branch capability. We then in 2010 took that to Afghanistan, so much of my post-military career has been done with military and police intelligence as well.
So famously, it was Churchill's ancestor who said, the Duke of Marlborough, who said as far back as 1715 that whoever wins the intelligence game will win the war. How far would you think that's true? How crucial is intelligence to any war?
Well, intelligence has moved on obviously from the time when the Duke of Wellington in his day said that it's important to know what's the other side of the hill. Intelligence comes at strategic level, at operational level, and at tactical level, and it's really the war winner. I mean, this week we've had the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Britain, and I think most academics looking back on that agree that one of the things that fundamentally defeated the Luftwaffe was their lack of military intelligence, in that they underestimated the size of the Royal Air Force. Royal Air Force overestimated the size of the Luftwaffe, but more importantly, they simply didn't understand our intelligence and early warning structure. So they couldn't understand how it was that we were able to get our few resources to where they needed to be so effectively. And that was a level of, it wasn't intelligence in itself, it was, of course, that was a mixture of electronic radar, observers, etc. But that was also underpinned by physical intelligence coming off the ground in France. These were all melded together. And into modern warfare, the Cold War, which is kind of happening with countries like China, Iran and Russia, it's very much an intelligence war. They're harvesting data freely available about our systems and our approach, and they're designing their whole strategy based on what they're learning from what we tell them for free. And so intelligence has never been more important in warfare than now.
And from a soldier's perspective on the ground, how vital is military intelligence?
Well, I mean, it's perhaps the one of the armours you have going in is that a vague understanding of what's going on. The danger may come at the strategic and operational level, where politicians want things to be one way and they're simply not. But every soldier that goes on the ground at the tactical level is a intelligence gathering asset. They are what they see and hear and what they're reporting back is informing real time the picture, and you have to meld those together. So it's vitally important.
Yes, I was going to ask you actually, in what sense is a soldier a source of intelligence in his or herself?
Well, what they see and hear and what they glean from talking to locals, what they see by the attitude of locals, what they see in terms of equipment on the ground, and even the disposition of enemy soldiers. When they're captured, are they well fed with high morale? Are they in a ragged state and haven't eaten for days? And that tells you a huge amount about the enemy.
So it's really building a picture from numerous sources snippets of information which provide a bigger picture.
And that goes all the way up the chain, and you would hope at the top of the chain information comes in a timely manner down, but sometimes that doesn't happen again, and as we saw with the Luftwaffe attack in the Battle of Britain, that can lead to failure.
Absolutely. And you mentioned your period in the Gulf War. I mean, what was it like for your battalion going into the Gulf War? In what sense was the military picture, the intelligence picture there for you?
Well, we know with hindsight that the intelligence picture was at least fanciful at the strategic level, the 45 minutes warning, etc. Whether it was actually maliciously manufactured or whether it was a sheer incompetence that caused that at the highest level, but it was a pretty confused picture. And in contrast to the first Gulf War, during the first Gulf War, what was interesting was that the Iraqi army, which had been trained by the British Army, was so effective at its reports and returns to its headquarters by intercepting those. They told you exactly how many soldiers they had because they're telling us how many they were feeding, and therefore that's how many they had. Their ammunition reports, their bomb damage assessments were very accurate, and by listening to them, we were knowing exactly whether the tactics worked. In the second Gulf War, that simply didn't happen. And even when we crossed the border, some were joking that military intelligence was an oxymoron. But meeting what we were told would probably be an Iraqi battalion, my battalion suddenly discovered we'd captured most of an Iraqi brigade. We had thousands of soldiers as opposed to less than 1,000. And so there were significant failings.
So you think there are lessons always to be learnt in military intelligence?
Well, military intelligence is an ongoing thing, and of course we must learn from it, but what we can't do is fight the last war with it. What we have to understand is step back and understand how military intelligence will help you in the next war and how it shapes and adapts, and the numerous things that you can go to. We know, for instance, that some malign actors in the world are looking at photographs soldiers take on the battlefield in Afghanistan and Iraq, and because they're geotagged, they know exactly what's going on where. So we have to be very careful that the march of technology is well understood, and we can protect ourselves from blunders and giving. And of course, the BBC famously broadcast during the Falklands War that the Argentine aircraft were setting their fuses too low, and if they were to set the fuses a bit lower, I should say, then they would succeed in blowing up our ships. Luckily, the Argentines weren't listening to the BBC.
Yeah. So it must be a responsibility, very difficult when you're on the ground from a soldier's perspective fighting that war, of course now being covered globally through multimedia, and how can you keep, as you say, sensitive stuff like that?
Well, it's strict control. It's getting soldiers to understand what the war is about in that respect. It's also understanding that you need we call G2 is intelligence. It's and operations is G3. Actually, the operations G3 is fed by G2, but G2 is an operations led activity which basically means rubbish in, rubbish out. You need the operational guys to tell the intelligence guys what they need to know, and so they direct it, and then they can say, and by the way, something else, as opposed to people just gathering a whole load of intelligence. And if you've done intelligence, yeah, what would you like to know? Well, what stuff have you got? It would take you all night to go through it. So it's got to be directed intelligence, it's got to be controlled. And then overlaying in the modern world, things like information operations, false news, etc. You have to be careful about being given false information. And of course, that is as old as time. The famous cases in history are things like the man who never was, the deception plan of the body of the Marine that was put off the coast of Spain with letters saying the main invasion wouldn't be Sicily, it would be Greece. The Germans believed that. So strategic deception is important. But then on the other hand, after the Germans took that hook, line, sinker, and we know it was at the top Adolf Hitler, on two separate occasions after that, on D-Day and at Arnhem, the Germans captured the actual plans, and they were in their headquarters within an hour of being captured, and they dismissed those because they'd been deceived the first time. So it's a double bluff.
Yeah, very important. And from your own career, are there highlights from your career? Is there any pivotal point that...
Well, I can remember the one particular ugly night in Iraq when long after the British media and Tony Blair's government were trumpeting that they'd killed Chemical Ali, the local Iraqis who we were working with brought me in a guy in a blue dishnash, and he said, "This guy's got something interesting to tell you." And after a certain amount of shouting and banging the table, the guy said, I'm Chemical Ali's driver. I took him to Baghdad. He's not dead. I handed him over 3 nights ago. And I was able to call, and they, brigade headquarters saying, Chemical Ali's not dead. He left here 2 nights ago. And they're like, we've just told the world we killed him. I'm like, you haven't. And they stalled for a while, and then eventually they had to accept they hadn't. He was eventually captured and hanged, famously.
Yes,
but
I remember,
for a long time, he had successfully hidden his existence. And that was perhaps one of the real-time instances I can recall where we changed the whole shape of intelligence.
Yeah, yeah. Can I just finish by asking you a rather cheeky question about your speech that defined really the Gulf War? It went international, didn't it? How do you feel about that famous eve of battle speech? I mean, awe-inspiring for those of us that heard it.
Well, I mean, it was for my soldiers and them alone, and it was recorded by a journalist, and I think one of the things was interesting was she copied it in shorthand, and there's very people can do shorthand nowadays. And the Sky News camera team that came didn't bring their camera, so the only recording of it was a handwritten in shorthand. And in the 24-hour news world, that's very unusual.
Yes.
And I think that in itself gave it a longevity. The other thing it also did was it couldn't be edited, changed around. It was written down. So it wasn't even recorded in camera. You couldn't even swap it about. It was what it was. But then it was for my soldiers. And again, at the time, we had crossed the border into Iraq. We were very busy with some sharp fights with the Iraqis. So we were totally unaware of, I was totally unaware of it becoming famous. And I was only aware of it being famous after I'd come back from the Gulf. And I was hugely surprised that anyone found it interesting. And of course the genesis of it was me telling my soldiers what I believed was about to happen. As it turned out, most of the modern world wanted to know as well, because nobody else knew. And
famously, of course, you said that we've not come to invade. Do you want to just
Well, I mean, it was and is deliberate and not to conquer. During my time in Headquarters Special Forces, it's no secret, I can tell you, that we were messaging, along with the Americans, the Iraqi military leadership. And what we were saying to them at the time is, if you turn on Saddam Hussein, when we come, we will put you in charge. That's what they're ready for. That's what they're expecting. That's what I expected to happen, because that's what we've been telling them. But after we'd taken control of Iraq, then someone made the decision to disband the Iraqi military. And that is the point in time, you can put your finger on it, when the wars of destruction, of the terrorism, everything started, that one decision. Because had the Iraqi military been left in charge of the country, none of what happened would have, the roadside bombs, the sectarian killings, none of this would have happened. Someone took a decision to open a Pandora's box which can never be closed again.
Colonel Tim Collins, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you today and to get that soldier's perspective, which we very rarely get, on aspects of military intelligence. Thank you so much for joining me at the National Army Museum.
Thank you.
This has been a production for the National Centre for Military Intelligence. To find out more and to support the NCMI, please visit ncmi.co.uk.